Golf Central on YouTube is brought to you by the new Paradigm Woods and Irons from Callaway.
Kicking off the new year from the spectacular plantation course, Kapalua in Maui. New year, and in some ways we're tempted to say good riddance to the old one, because 2022 was unlike any in golf history. The sport cleaved and clobbered in the fight between the Tour and LIV. As part of the changes made by the PGA Tour in response to the threat from LIV, they have announced that 17 tournaments are sort of elevated. They're calling them designated events. Rich Lerner alongside Brandel Chambly. What does that mean? Bigger purses, let's start with that. More money flowing in. Smaller fields, generally speaking, more stars playing against each other more often. That's the idea. What do you think of it? How do you think it'll work?
Well, if you go back, I would say there were 8 tournaments since the FedEx Cup started that felt like they were major championships, that had the major championship feel to them. Obviously, the 4 majors and the players and the FedEx Cup events, because all of the very best players were in those events. And in particular at the FedEx Cup, they were paired in such a way where you got all the star power at the end of the field Thursday, Friday. Of course, you get them Saturday, Sunday. So in essence, you're going to have what feels like a major championship 17 times. And in essence, you're going to get more of the best players playing more often. So, you know, they get to pick 3 other events, so they're going to play 20 events, which means you're going to get Rory McIlroy 2, 3, 4 more weeks over the course of a year than you would otherwise have gotten him if the PGA Tour hadn't come up with this schedule. So I think the best players will benefit in a huge way. I think the spectators will benefit in a huge way. There are question marks about how much movement in and movement out of the top 50. I have no doubt that people will take a close look at that. And if there's not enough movement in and movement out of the top 50 in the world rankings, they'll modify the schedule accordingly, because they'll just be too much of an uproar. The last thing that they want is a closed shop, sort of a self-perpetuating system. So the criticism right now is, what about all the other events? What about the players who are not in the top 50? How are they going to gain access to these events? You know, some players have been asked about that, and of course they sort of go with the common refrain of, if you play better, you will be rewarded. And certainly that's true, but there is a sweet spot number that you're looking for, movement in and movement out. It can't be a self-perpetuating system. I'll be keeping a close eye on that as the year unfolds.
John Rahm has said, you know, it's a luxury to be in these short, smaller fields. You just have a better chance to win, right? I think one of the issues through the years with professional golf is that it's so deep, it's become hard to win. How do you become a star? Right? How do you cross over so that you're covered on some of the other networks? You have to win. But if it's difficult to win, it's hard to create stars. I think possibly one of the offshoots of this new system is that guys will win more and they'll become bigger stars. And I think that's good for the entertainment product, potentially. What do you think about that?
Look, when I hear people say it's become harder to win, I think every era could have claimed that over the previous era. They could have all claimed that. So I've never given that statement much credence. And I've looked at the numbers, and I could make the argument that it wasn't true. But I will say this. In the same way Moneyball came about, right?
Yeah.
So the Oakland A's, they go off and do their thing, okay? But guess what happens? As soon as everybody gets a hold of the strategy of Moneyball, the strategy that made the Oakland A's and made the movie Moneyball no longer helps the Oakland A's, because everybody has that strategy. So if everybody can get into the data and find the optimized way to play every single shot and every single hole, I think it leads to, yes, congestion, because nobody's going to gain in the strategy aspect of it, where that's what set Jack apart, that's what set Tiger apart, that's what set Hogan apart. So that part of it is gone. But in general, superstardom is always the exception. It's never the norm.
I think it's always been hard to win.
Yes, of course. Superstars
look at
are
me.
rare. Parity is the norm.
You win one a year, and you play for 20 years, you sail into the Hall of Fame, right? So my point is, if you're only winning once a year, most of the world's not talking about you all that often. But if you can get smaller fields and get guys in position to maybe win 3 and 4 and 5 times a year, then you create more stars.
Look, it's the unfortunate aspect of, and I get what the PGA Tour needed to do. I've said for, every time I get asked, I will not admit that LIV is capitalism at work. I think it's corruption at work, sadly. But it is competition. And the competition has made the PGA Tour, if you're one of the most exceptional players, better. I don't believe that smaller fields is, in general, a good idea. I don't like it. I think you should be creating as many playing opportunities for as many players as possible, because you get great stories. Underdog stories are a huge part of the game. We still talk about what John Daly did in 1991 at the PGA Championship. We are talking about Tom Kim right now because he was an underdog story at the President's Cup. Stars are great stories, but they're right there with underdog stories. We still talk about what Jack Fleck did in the 1955 U.S. Open because he was an underdog.
Through the years, golf fans, this is my experience, have typically rooted for the superstars ahead of the long shot guy. Come on, Jack. Tiger, make a run.
Of course. They're familiar with them. Arnold had a flair. Jack won. Look, the quickest way to popularity is to win your way to popularity, for sure. But that's not to say that, the developmental aspect of playing the tour is still very important. And you develop stars. Stars develop typically. They come out and play 2, 3, 4 years. At the end of this year, it may be that Tony Finau wins 7 or 8 times. Tony Finau wouldn't have been in these fields 3, 4, 5 years ago if you're just basing it upon wins. He'd won 1 time in his first 188 events. But we all knew he was a superstar in the making. Now, we assume that. I'm not going to call him a superstar right now, but he certainly has the potential to be one. And it would surprise nobody if he won 5, 6, 7 times in 2023.
What I would call the LDP, the Live Deterrent Program, sort of conceived or led by Tiger and Rory in that now sort of famous meeting they had with a bunch of other players in Delaware. And the idea was simple. We need to come together more often. And Rory made the points. When I watch a Tampa Bay Buccaneers NFL game, I expect to see Tom Brady throw the football. We can reasonably expect that now, but it raises the question, where's Rory this week? Now, the guys are allowed 1 out of these 17 designated events. They're allowed to skip 1 without being penalized. Would have been nice for Rory, after all that talk, to be here at Maui. Certainly entitled.
I think 8 years in, Rory will have played more tournaments this year than he's probably played on the PGA Tour, perhaps in his career, but certainly over the last 2 or 3, 4 years, and that's a good thing. Rory, as we all know, lives on the east coast of Florida, and Hawaii's, 11, 12-hour flight away. And, I can understand giving somebody a pass on one event. If I had to bet, I'd bet that next year when Kapalua begins the season, and not just, the 8th, 9th event of the season, 10th event of the season, I would bet that Rory will be there.
Yeah. So they're going, as part of these changes, do away with this wraparound season, which begins in September 2024. This place, Kapalua, will kick off the brand new season.